this next take has to, let's start with, it starts with coaching and ends with organizations. And I guess this playoffs, there's been a lot of coaching changes. I don't know. I guess again, would love a stats guy, right? That how many coaching changes has there been this playoffs, and how does that compare with previous seasons? Okay, because it feels like this year around we've had a whole bunch of series that maybe didn't go the way that organizations hoped, and then they made a coaching change, and the Suns are one of them. Obviously, the Bucks was another one. The Sixers was another one that made some changes, and there were a few obviously teams that were on the fringe there that made head coach changes as well. And I guess this conversation here that I wanted to bring up here is to do with what does it take for an organization to create the stability of allowing teams to work through these disappointments? Because that's what it feels like, right? And I guess if we go and look at, let's say, the dynasty that was the Spurs, okay? Now, that's a great one to maybe look at here because they didn't win five in a row, okay? They didn't win five in a row. They sort of won one, lost one, won one, lost one, sort of thing. That's why there was the whole argument, like, as Spurs a dynasty here, all right, and so on and so forth. But imagine that the Spurs said, oh, Pop, you won one last year, you lost next year. That's disappointing. You're fired. Like, that's the thing, okay? And I guess, you guys obviously were at the finals not that long ago. Mike Budenholzer with the Bucks won a ring only a couple of years ago, and now he's gone, okay? And it's like, I don't know, what would it take for organizations to take the mantra here that, okay, these sort of failures, and they are failures, I guess, okay, because 29 teams failed to capture the ring each year, all right, are okay, but we're going to stay the course here from a coaching and organization perspective.
See, I don't know if I'd say that those two recent examples haven't stayed the course, right? So Milwaukee has been semi-relevant now, I want to say since 2018, 2019. They were legitimate playoff contenders, second round exits. Um, they were there, right? So I'm just trying to recall. They went against Toronto in the conference finals, obviously to lose, to then watch them win the championship. So they were there. Obviously win the championship in 2021. The bubble season, a little bit of a weird season, but they go down to Miami, I believe. Um, then last season, Middleton goes down. I think they've been there along the way. I think when you look at the Budenhauser firing, a lot of the time you would just look at the star players, right? So I personally feel like star players have a lot of say naturally in what happens in those teams. And you looked at the press conference responses basically saying, hey, Giannis, why don't you play defense on Jimmy Butler? And it's like, well, you got to respect what the coach says. We know notoriously that Budenhauser doesn't make good adjustments. There were lots of things that right, people who aren't in the NBA, people who don't have professional experience in these leagues, saying I probably would have called a timeout. I probably would have maybe put Brook Lopez near the ring and just not allowed a lob because they're down by one or something. Like there were lots of little coaching things that he could have done better that are not isolated to this series. It has been an ongoing issue for him. There are some games that they scheme and he's very stubborn. I think he stays the course almost too much. He's not dynamic enough. And we're seeing the impact of good coaching in Spoelstra. And then when you flip over to Phoenix as your other example, they made the finals, then they blow out in round two, and they blow out in round two. That's a 3-year window now. That's a lot. Great regular season record, but couldn't get over the hump. Now there's asterisks galore there. Chris Paul was potentially injured. Was there COVID going around the team on that 2022 flame out? This season, well, Kevin Durant just joined, but we kind of know that time is really precious as well. And we've watched Monty Williams have a crack at it for 4 or 5 seasons now as well. It didn't pan out the way we wanted. You try to pivot in a different direction, right? It's a new owner syndrome as well. New owner comes in, we've got new players, we've got a new coach, and we'll probably ride this way for another 3, 4 years. And without a championship in that window, then you move on to another one, right? And you look at the Spurs dynasty, just to bring this full circle, they did pretty much win a championship every 4 to 5 years, right? And the biggest stretch that they did from their 2014 championship until now, they obviously relied on Kawhi Leonard and he gets hurt in that Golden State series. And then they never really come back from that. And they tried to be competitive and it never came to fruition. And then they finally committed to tanking recently. That, I think, is what you probably see in the NBA a lot for good franchises or for franchises that are within striking distance. But a lot of that's personnel dependent as well. We just talked about the Orlando Magic. I don't believe they currently have a player that is like, oh my God, we need to build around this player in the next 3 years because we might get something out of them.
I think if you go back to the Suns take there, because obviously, you follow them very closely. Are you saying that if you guys had said, hey, Monty Williams, this season was a total failure, you guys, got knocked out second round again, but what if we stay the course? All right. What if we try and look to bring some reinforcement? What if we get a full year of KD? Okay. Um, let's let's keep plugging away. You guys are still being a top four Western Conference team there. We don't need to make that change. And let me get this right here. I'm not trying to make the take here that the coaches are not good or bad. I'm not saying coaches don't make judgment or coaching errors, but every coach does, let's be clear. Okay. It's a matter of the result that ultimately happens with those decisions that you make on the sidelines. At the end of the day, when your players do sort of make comments that can be construed in a different way, like Giannis sort of saying things like, well, I wasn't put on Jimmy Butler, etc., it doesn't sort of necessarily look good. Absolutely. Okay. But I guess with the Suns, let's say you guys had said that to Monty Williams, okay, would you have a less successful season next year if you had done this? Or simply bringing Vogel in, now you're going to suddenly have a much better year. And this is a what if, obviously.
I think when we talk about coaching situations, and obviously the Phoenix one is very close to my heart, I believe the Phoenix situation is centered around DeAndre Ayton, right? So you look at what's happening currently. Obviously, Monty Williams is out, and there's been some pretty public, I guess, interesting things between him and DeAndre Ayton, right? They didn't talk over the offseason when the extension thing happened. There's been a couple of verbal disputes, and then Chris Paul as well, right? And Chris Paul and Monty are very close, and they've obviously been a bit of a culture setter there. Devin Booker's obviously loved that and really taken that on board. And unfortunately, DeAndre Ayton doesn't respond to that. Could be an age thing. I'm not too sure. But DeAndre Ayton is your number one draft pick that you chose over Luka, that you've chosen to extend and pay $100 million. Obviously, they can't get off that asset because I think a lot of people around the league look at him and say, well, he's essentially just like a very low teens double double guy that doesn't want to play all the time and isn't actually helping you. I don't know why I take that back as an asset with something. So I think this has been done to reinvigorate him. This is one of those addition by subtraction sort of things. Monty is out. You get Frank Vogel in. Hopefully, it's more defensive minded, but it also activates DeAndre Ayton, right? So that you're not really getting a new player. You're just getting the player that you hoped that you had to begin with. And then Chris Paul, as we all know with Chris Paul, the age is a real concern. The injuries are always a concern at this point, and the contract is a massive concern. So they're logical things to move off on, but I think that Phoenix is pivoting in this direction because they're trying to activate DeAndre Ayton, right? Even if it's only short term to get a better trade value out of him, because DeAndre Ayton is $100 million, like 10 and 10 guy at this point.
So I guess if we then take that same sort of example from Suns or other examples to the Spurs, what justifies the Spurs to hold on to Pop? Because we're saying that
Because
these other coaches
players,
are good coaches, but these other coaches are good coaches. Pop is a great coach, but he's not getting results, so it's time to just get someone else in. Maybe it'll activate some of these other Spurs players.
I think it's as simple as the players, right? So what we kind of forget a little bit is the coach is in charge of the team, but is not the most paid person on like as a part of the team. In fact, the coaches statistically are usually like on par with the 10, 11 stringers, right? So when you've got a guy that makes $50 million and brings, 200 million or 500 million value to your franchise, and he obviously has some competitive edge and suddenly doesn't like the coach or he's not getting along or doesn't feel like it's working, it's a very logical decision. Well, I would rather keep the $500 million dude happy than the $5 million coach. And I also think it's a bit of a culture thing of the league where it's just normal. It's just normal for coaches to get fired, right? Every offseason, we watch 10 of them get fired. So the rationale to hold on to them, right, is pretty low. And unless there's someone like Spoelstra who has had prolonged success as a franchise, or someone like Spoelstra, sorry, not Spoelstra, Popovich, or someone like Steve Kerr, right? Yeah, it's pretty easy just to get off them at this point because there's not many franchises that are set up for long hauls now. And the way that the new collective bargaining agreement's going, you do wonder if we're going to see more individual champions and maybe even less dynasties moving forward.
This is Two Guys with Spare Time. I'm Faz, this is Nick. You're probably a basketball fan like us, so hopefully you can throw us an assist in giving our video a like and subscribing to our channel.
And if you got thoughts, feelings, or even some suggestions, please put them down in the comment section below. And thank you for using your spare time to watch us in our spare time.